In recent weeks, a YouTube video has been making the rounds of social media. A YouTube video in which the self-identified prophet John is extolling President Trump for signing a new bill into law allowing prayer back into public schools. In this video, the speaker is rehashing a popular notion that the moral decay of our society in general and of our schools in particular is directly linked to a ban on prayer in public schools. Now, I want you to know I tried to verify whether or not that was a real video and that had really happened, and I was unable to do so. So what I did instead was go to the U.S. Department of Education website to see what the current policy about prayer in school actually states. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Now, I am old, but I honestly do not remember there ever being prayer, school-sponsored prayer in the public schools I attended, other than opening prayers at football games. Perhaps some of you are old enough to remember that or lived in places where they were still doing that. I don't know, but I don't remember that. But for me, that's likely due to the fact that the first legal challenges to prayer in schools occurred in the early 1960s before I was in school. In 1962, in Engel v. Vital, a suit was filed challenging a New York State sanctioned prayer that was to be used at the start of each school day by every school in New York State. Writing for the majority, Justice Hugo Black wrote that the government is to, quote, stay out of the business of writing or sanctioning official prayers and leave that purely religious function to the people themselves and to those the people choose to look to for religious guidance. According to Adam Hamilton, in his book Confronting the Controversies, the argument was that the concept of a school's writing and sponsoring prayer represented the state's sanctioning religious practice and was an opening that could lead in the direction of an established church, which is contrary to our First Amendment. In 1963, the Supreme Court decided two additional cases that it heard together: Abington Township School District v. Shemp and Murray v. Curlett, a suit brought by the renowned atheist Madalyn Murray O'Hair on behalf of her son, who was a student in public schools. In these cases, the justice rejected state laws requiring daily Bible reading and the recitation of the Lord's Prayer in schools, stating that both violated the Establishment Clause of our U.S. Constitution. Now, the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the free speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Other suits followed those three, which led to the removal of the Ten Commandments in schools where they were publicly displayed, and also the rejection of mandatory moments of silence at the beginning of a school day, or even school-sponsored prayer at high school graduations. As I mentioned earlier, I went to the U.S. Department of Education website to see exactly what is and isn't allowed, and I'll tell you, just briefly summarize what I found. Here's what I found. Students can pray anytime in school. So when we hear this notion that prayer has been banned from public schools, that's a misnomer. It's not true. Students can pray anytime, and if you've ever been around a student who is ill-prepared for an exam, I promise you, you have witnessed prayer in public schools. Right? I can attest to that personally. Students can pray anywhere in school. There's nothing that disallows them from praying. They can wear clothing with a religious message. They are allowed to share their faith in school if it's done in the appropriate forum. They can meet for Bible study or prayer groups after hours on school property, as long as the group follows the same guidelines as any other extracurricular activity. Students can write about religious topics as long as they meet the criteria of a given assignment. They can pray as a part of their graduation speech as long as it's the student leading the prayer and not a school-sponsored, dictated, mandated prayer. Teachers. Teachers can wear religious jewelry such as crosses or the Star of David. Teachers can teach the importance of religion to society as part of social studies and humanities classes. Teachers can study the Bible or other religious literature as literature. Teachers can discuss the origins of religious days. Teachers can assign classic literature that has in it religious themes. Teachers can participate in extracurricular groups such as Bible study or prayer groups, as long as they are not doing so as an official part of their function as a teacher, as long as they're not representing the school, but only themselves when they do so. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the Department of Education website says about what the role prayer can and cannot play in our public schools. So the question, I think, is how do I feel about this as both a parent and as a religious professional, as a Christian pastor? You, as always, at Journey of Faith, are free to disagree with me. But I want to say very unequivocally, I strongly believe in the separation of church and state. And I do not believe that it is the public school's job to teach faith to my son. That's my job as a parent. And it's the responsibility of this and other faith communities to teach religion to our kids. Besides, my son, Hunter, is privileged to attend a school that is multicultural. It is diverse in many ways. One of his teachers is Jewish. And among his classmates are kids who come from a multitude of religious backgrounds. Some are Jewish, some are Christian, some are Muslim, some are Hindu, some are Buddhist, and the list goes on to those that I probably don't even know about. And I know that there are some who profess no faith at all. I think it would be highly inappropriate to subject those students and teachers to one particular expression of faith, even if my child were in the majority and the faith taught and modeled was one that was compatible with our own. I want to say that again. I think it would be highly inappropriate to subject other students and teachers to one particular expression of faith, even if it's the majority for my child, and it was modeling and teaching what I might otherwise teach. Having said that, Hunter is free to share his faith with his teachers and friends, and he's free to write about his faith should he choose to do so. And I know from conversations I've had with him and from work that I've read that he does that. He does it freely. Faith is an important part of his life. It's foundational to who he is. And there is nothing in law that prohibits him from incorporating that foundation of faith into his school life and his school work. My prayer is that he will always do that in a manner that is respectful of those from other religious traditions or from no religious tradition at all. And if I ever find out he's not doing it in a respectful manner, there will be a price to pay at home. So if you ever hear my child doing any of those things, please feel free to tell me, and we'll have a long talk when he gets home. In 1 Thessalonians 5:17, the Apostle Paul teaches us to pray without ceasing. He challenges us to make our entire lives an act of prayer. As Adam Hamilton says in his book, our entire lives should be bathed in prayer. From the simple blessing we have as we break the night fast and eat our morning meal, to the drive to work, to the moments throughout the day when we offer the simple prayer of thanks or praise or request for help. We should be constantly in contact with prayer, with God and prayer. And that's something Colin was trying to discuss with the kids in children's time. Some people even suggest that the way we live our lives ought to be seen as an act of prayer. We are to pray throughout the day, even at school. Having said this, we must also note that Jesus taught us to pray in a specific way, paying attention to what he says in the passage Kevin read from the Gospel of Matthew. When you pray, don't be like hypocrites. They love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners so that people will see them. I assure you that's the only reward they'll get. But when you pray, go to your room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who is present in that secret place. Your Father who sees what you do in secret will reward you. Jesus indicates here in this passage from Matthew that the kind of prayer we offer God as individual Christians is meant to be prayed humbly and without show. Prayer is not a performance. Prayer is not a sermon. It's not meant to be something we do to impress others, but it's something we do merely for ourselves and out of our deep relationship with God. Nor is it meant to be something that we impose on others who may not believe as we do. And I think that's important, folks. Again, it's not the job of the school to bring our children to Christ. It's the job of us as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends and, yes, the church. As Adam Hamilton writes, if kids meet Christ today, it will be because in the hour a week we have these kids in Sunday school, in our case, church and children's church and youth, church members take seriously the call to teach and mentor children. Lives are being changed because of what our Sunday school teachers and our youth leaders do. And because of the interactions each of you have with them on Sunday mornings and the Christian values that you model for them. Now I want to say a final word to the educators in our midst, and several of them aren't here today. I was kind of wishing they were. I am grateful for each of you. And I'm grateful for those educators who teach my son. And though you cannot overtly seek to bring your students to faith in Christ, there is nothing in the law that keeps you from ministering to them. You can encourage the kids you teach, and you can believe in them. And the educators in this church, I know you do that. You play such an important role in their lives, and God is honored by what you have chosen to do with your lives. You chose a career that will never pay 6 figures, but every day you invest in the lives of our children. And that is huge. And while public prayer in schools is not allowed, nor do I believe it should be, there is nothing that keeps you from praying for your students, as I suspect many of you do. I have a teacher friend I met through the Walk to Emmaus retreat weekend. She teaches elementary school down the road in Georgetown. And at the beginning of each new school year, she does something that I find utterly remarkable. She's a big believer in the power of prayer. And each year, at the beginning of the year, she takes to Facebook and asks her prayer warrior friends to pray for her students throughout the year. Now, she doesn't call them by name. That would be inappropriate. That would be out of line. But for each person who responds to her request to match up, to pair up with one of her students, she gives them a number, that child's classroom number. Hunter is number 22 in his class. So if it was Hunter was in her class, and somebody would be given the number 22 to pray for Hunter. And she asks them if they will pray for that child each and every day throughout the school year. And people step up and they take that on, and every year she finds people who are willing to do that. And from time to time, if a particular child in her class is struggling for whatever reason, be it something at school or something at home, she'll ask her friends to pray especially for that student's particular number. Prayer is allowed in public schools, just not as a state-mandated, sanctioned, sponsored way. As teachers, you may pray for your students and you may live out the gospel and how you love them at school. You may ask the Holy Spirit to work through you as you work with even the most challenging of these kids. And you may listen for God's guidance in what you say and what you do. All that to say that while there may be no such a thing as public or school-sponsored prayer in our public schools, there is definitely a place for prayer. Always has been, and always will be. And while I believe in the separation of church and state, and that there should not be school-sponsored prayer times, I do believe in the power of prayer, and I do believe in its ongoing presence in our schools. And I am thankful for God for that. Thanks be to God. Amen.